I mean, have you ever hit send on an important email and then, like a split second later, you realize there was a typo in the subject line?
Oh, absolutely. It's the worst.
Right. And suddenly you just feel like the worst human being alive. I'm talking about that visceral sinking feeling where a tiny, almost invisible mistake triggers this massive wave of internal self-criticism.
Yeah, it's like suddenly you were being berated by an inner judge that is just absolutely relentless.
Telling you that you are entirely incompetent. And it's wild because it feels entirely disproportionate to what actually happened.
Exactly. I mean, you made a spelling error, but your body is reacting as if you just ruined your entire career.
Yeah.
The physiological stress response just kicks into high gear, like your heart rate spikes, your stomach drops, you basically become a passenger in your own brain,
Yeah.
totally hijacked by this overwhelming sense of shame.
Okay, so let's unpack this because that feeling is pretty universal. For today's deep dive, we are looking at a really fascinating stack of sources that map out the architecture of the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
We're pulling from classic Freudian psychoanalysis, Eric Brunn's transactional analysis, and some modern clinical research on perfectionism. The mission here is to basically understand the invisible forces driving our behavior.
Right, and to learn how to strengthen our rational self against the tyranny of that internal critic, which is incredibly necessary work.
It really is.
If we, connect this to the bigger picture of mental well-being, there's a lot of talk today about self-compassion.
Absolutely. Our sources touch on some incredible mindfulness practices for that, like Dr. Kristen Neff's Soften, Soothe, Allow practice.
Yeah, that's a great one.
It's a fantastic, clinically backed tool for working with difficult emotions. It guides you to physically soften your muscles, verbally soothe yourself, and just, allow the emotion to be there without fighting it.
Which is highly effective for transforming an internal stress response in the moment. Those tools act as a crucial first aid kit for the nervous system.
Right. They help bring you down from that panic.
Exactly. When you use a method like that, you are actively shifting your physiology out of a fight-or-flight state. But the sources we are diving into today take a slightly different angle.
We are looking under the hood.
Yes. To figure out why those difficult emotions exist in the first place. Like, why is the mind generating such a harsh stress response to a simple typo?
And to understand why we even need emotional tools to soothe ourselves, we first have to understand the foundational model of the psyche.
Which means going all the way back to Sigmund Freud.
Right. I mean, Freud's legacy is definitely complex, but his contribution to how we view the mind is just undeniable.
Totally. You have to remember, he was a medical doctor, a neurologist, and he started noticing that many of his patients had severe physical symptoms like paralysis, chronic pain, hallucinations that had absolutely no physical medical cause.
Right. The sources mention the famous case of Anna O.
Yes. Handled by Freud and his colleague Joseph Breuer.
Yeah.
That case was really the catalyst for all of this.
Because she suffered from severe visual and physical disturbances, right?
Exactly. And Breuer and Freud discovered that when she was guided to talk about deeply repressed, highly emotional childhood traumas, her physical symptoms would actually temporarily vanish.
Oh, wow. Just from talking about it.
Just from bringing it to the surface.
Yeah.
And this observation led Freud to a pretty radical conclusion for the time. He realized the conscious mind we experience every day is just the tip of the iceberg.
Ah, the famous iceberg model.
That's the one. He proposed that only about 1/10 of our mind is conscious. The other 90% is unconscious, totally hidden beneath the icy water.
And that hidden mass isn't just like a passive storage unit for memories, right?
Not at all. It is a highly active, pressurized system. It is constantly driving our conscious behavior without us even realizing it.
Which is kind of terrifying to think about.
It is. And Freud theorized that lurking beneath the surface are 3 distinct systems warring for control: the id, the superego, and the ego.
So let's break those down because I think it's important to clarify that they aren't physical parts of the brain you can, see on an MRI.
Right, they are more like operating systems.
Okay, so the id, that's the one we are born with. It's entirely unconscious, and it operates on what Freud called the pleasure principle.
Mm-hmm.
The best way I can picture the id is basically a toddler in a grocery store.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. Like, if it wants a candy bar, it doesn't care about the budget, it doesn't care that it's right before dinner, and it certainly doesn't care about social etiquette. It just wants the candy right now.
Exactly. The id is the source of all our primitive, impulsive energy. It contains our fundamental life, drives the desire for survival, food, intimacy, as well as our aggressive, destructive drives.
It just demands immediate gratification to relieve the tension.
Yes. But of course, as we grow up, society steps in. Around ages 3 to 5, children begin to internalize the rules, expectations, and punishments of their parents and their culture.
And that forms the second system, the superego.
Right?
So if the id is the wild toddler, the superego is like the strictest, most unrelenting boarding school headmaster imaginable.
I love that. Yes, it operates on the morality principle. The superego is our internalized moral compass, but it is rarely a gentle guide.
It wants perfection.
Absolute flawless perfection. And when you fall short of its impossible standards, the superego uses the heavy artillery of guilt and shame to punish you.
Which brings us to the poor ego, just stuck in the middle, trying to keep the peace.
The ego is our conscious self. It operates on the reality principle.
So its entire job is to mediate between the chaotic, animalistic demands of the id and the punishing, impossible rules of the superego.
Right, and find a way to satisfy both in the real world without getting you arrested or totally ostracized from society.
It is the ultimate diplomat operating in a perpetual war zone.
That's exactly what it is. Freud used a brilliant analogy for this dynamic, actually. He likened the id to a massive, incredibly powerful wild horse, and the ego to the rider sitting on top.
Okay, here is where I struggle a bit with that metaphor, though. Well, a rider usually has reins and a bit to control the horse. But the ego doesn't actually have any raw energy or power of its own, right? It has to borrow its energy from the id.
That's a really good point.
So it's more like a rider clinging to the back of a wild Mustang, desperately trying to steer it by just whispering in its ear, hoping the horse decides to go in a socially acceptable direction.
I like that refinement a lot. The ego is constantly managing the superior strength. And this raises a really important question. What happens when the ego fails?
Yeah. Like, what if the id's impulses are just too strong, or the superego's punishments are too severe?
And the ego experiences intense, crushing anxiety. And to protect itself from just shattering under that pressure, the ego deploys defense mechanisms.
Defense mechanisms. I hear that term thrown around a lot in pop psychology, like, oh, you're just projecting. But how do these mechanisms actually work in the brain?
Well, from a clinical perspective, defense mechanisms are unconscious protective behaviors. They distort, transform, or falsify reality so the ego can cope with the anxiety.
Bending reality to relieve the pressure.
Precisely. Take repression, for example. If a traumatic memory or forbidden impulse is just too painful to acknowledge, the ego actively pushes it down into the unconscious.
So you don't just forget it.
No. Your mind builds a psychological wall to block it from conscious awareness. But the pressure is still there. Always.
Which is why it often leaks out in other ways.
Exactly. Another mechanism is projection. Let's say you harbor intense feelings of inadequacy and jealousy toward a colleague who just got promoted.
Okay.
Well, the superego would punish you with immense guilt for feeling jealous of a friend. The ego can't handle that guilt, so it scrambles the signal.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Suddenly, you genuinely believe that they are the ones acting arrogant and trying to sabotage you. You attribute your own unacceptable feelings onto someone else.
That's wild. You aren't lying on purpose. Your brain is literally augmenting reality to protect you from the pain of your own jealousy.
It is. And then there's reaction formation, where a person acts in the exact opposite manner to their true unacceptable feelings.
Like what?
Like someone who is deeply insecure about their intelligence might become overly pedantic, constantly correcting other people's grammar and showing off trivial knowledge.
Just to hide the insecurity.
Right. The ego distorts reality just enough to keep you functioning in society.
So we see how the ego defends itself against the raw impulses of the E's. But, reading through these clinical sources, it seems like the real danger for most people today isn't a wild id.
No, it's not.
It's an overpowered superego. Which brings us straight into the modern plague of perfectionism.
Yeah, perfectionism is essentially the superego running wild. Clinicians often break the superego down into two distinct parts.
Okay, what are they?
First is the ego ideal. This is this grandiose, flawless vision of who we should be. The perfect employee, the perfect parent, the perfect partner.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. And the second part is the conscience. The punitive side that monitors our behavior and applies the electric shock of shame the moment we deviate from that ideal.
But the thing is, we never actually reach the ideal. It's physically impossible.
Which is the tragedy of it. When the superego becomes too rigid, it results in what clinicians call superego pathology. The inner judge is just never satisfied.
And where does that come from?
It usually stems from early childhood experiences of conditional love. A child learns, very early on, that they are only praised, valued, or loved when they achieve high grades, or when they are perfectly compliant and quiet.
So they internalize that critical parental voice. They learn that their fundamental worth as a human being is entirely conditional on their output.
Exactly. And the result is chronic anxiety. They develop a deep, paralyzing fear of failure. It often leads to severe procrastination.
Right, because if you never start the project, you can't fail at it.
Yep. It creates a vicious cycle of self-hatred.
I have to push back a little here, though.
Go ahead.
We live in a society that rewards high achievement. Isn't having a strong moral compass and incredibly high standards like a good thing? I mean, I want my heart surgeon to be a perfectionist. I want the engineers designing airplanes to be perfectionists. How do we separate a healthy drive for excellence from this destructive pathology?
That's a great question. The distinction lies in the underlying motivation. Psychology separates this into adaptive versus maladaptive perfectionism.
Okay.
Adaptive perfectionism means you set high but realistic goals. You are motivated by the joy of the challenge. You derive genuine pleasure from your efforts.
So it feels good to try hard.
Right. And most importantly, if you fail, your fundamental sense of self-worth remains intact. You can analyze the failure, learn from it, and move forward.
You are being pulled forward by the desire to succeed.
Exactly. Maladaptive perfectionism, on the other hand, means you're being pushed from behind by the terror of failure.
Ah, that makes sense.
It is driven by unrelenting standards, often fueled by socially prescribed pressures. This belief that everyone around you demands perfection from you.
You aren't striving for excellence to feel joy. You are striving for flawlessness merely to avoid the crushing shame delivered by your superego.
Yes. And it leads to burnout, depression, and a total inability to celebrate your wins. Because the moment you achieve a goal, the superego just moves the goalposts further away.
Oof, that hits close to home. But here's where it gets really interesting. Up until now, we've been talking about this isolated internal battle.
Right, the ease, ego, and superego warring inside a single brain.
But in the 1950s, a psychiatrist named Eric Berne looked at this and asked, well, how does this internal war spill out into the real world?
Yeah, Berne's work is brilliant.
He took these Freudian concepts and applied them to how we communicate, creating a framework called transactional analysis.
It's a very practical evolution of these ideas. Instead of solely analyzing a patient's internal unconscious, transactional analysis looks at the social interaction, the transactions between people.
And he theorized that we all possess 3 distinct ego states, right? And we unconsciously shift between them multiple times a day during our interactions.
We do.
Let's walk through those 3 states, because as I was reading the sources, I immediately recognized them in my own life. First is the child state.
The child state is when you are acting, thinking, or feeling exactly how you did in the past when you were young.
So it's not just acting childish.
No, it's a literal neurological replay of early patterns. It can manifest as the natural, spontaneous, creative child, or it can be the adapted, fearful, people-pleasing child who is just trying to avoid punishment.
Got it. Then you have the parent state. This is when you unconsciously mimic the attitudes and behaviors of your primary caregivers.
Right. You might channel a nurturing, protective parent, or you might slip into the critical, controlling parent who wags their finger and lectures.
And the third state is the adult.
Yes. This is your objective, rational processing center. When you are in the adult state, you are anchored entirely in the present moment.
So you aren't reacting based on past fears or mimicking past authorities?
Exactly. You are analyzing the current data and responding logically.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well, if you look closely, Berne's child state is deeply connected to those Freudian othered impulses and early childhood vulnerabilities. And the parent state is clearly the external manifestation of the strict superego. That means the adult state is the rational ego, desperately trying to manage reality.
That is the crucial connection. And Berne noted that what seem like normal, everyday conversations often conceal hidden motivations. He called these interactions games.
Games?
Yeah, and these games follow predictable scripts written during our childhood, and they almost always lead to counterproductive, frustrating outcomes.
Give me an example of how a game plays out in a normal day.
Okay, imagine a couple in the kitchen. Partner A asks a simple adult state question. Did you pay the electric bill today?
Innocent enough.
But partner B, who is stressed from work, interprets this through a lens of childhood insecurity. They immediately shift into a defensive child state and snap back, I can't do everything around here, stop nagging me. Oh, wow. Partner B just reacted as if they were a teenager being scolded for not doing their chores.
Precisely. Now, partner A has a choice. If partner A stays in the adult state, they might say, I'm not nagging, I just needed to know if I should log in and pay it.
Which would de-escalate it.
Right.
Hmm.
But more often, partner B's childish reaction triggers partner A to shift into a critical parent state.
Uh-oh.
Partner A crosses their arms and lectures, well, if you were more responsible, I wouldn't have to ask you these things. Boom.
Whoa.
They're now playing a game.
The transaction is completely derailed.
Yep, and an argument ensues that has nothing to do with the electric bill and everything to do with their unmanaged ego states.
And according to Byrne, the winner of a social game is whoever can recognize what's happening and return to their adult ego state first.
Which is hard to do in the heat of the moment.
Oh, totally. But I find that so incredibly empowering. By learning to recognize which state you are in or which state your boss, your spouse, or your friend is in, you don't have to just react blindly.
You have immense agency over your social environment. You can actively choose to take a breath, step out of the script, and shift into your objective adult state to de-escalate the conflict.
That's huge.
Brian also identified 4 core life positions that dictate the scripts we follow. These are fundamental beliefs about our own worth and the worth of others.
Like, I'm okay and you're okay.
Yes, that's the healthiest position, where both people are valued and respected. But if your superego is demanding perfection, you might operate from, I'm okay and you're not okay.
That sounds like the classic micromanager who operates entirely from a critical parent state, constantly pointing out everyone else's flaws.
Exactly. Or, conversely, you might operate from, I'm not okay and you're okay.
Oh, so that person is perpetually stuck in a fearful child state, constantly seeking approval, apologizing for things they didn't do, and just feeling inferior.
Yep. These positions dictate the games we play and the drama we invite into our lives.
It's like we are all just walking around unconsciously casting our coworkers and partners in these ancient childhood plays.
We really are.
So how do we stop the play? Now that we can recognize when our punishing superego or our critical parent state is hijacking our minds, how do we actually fight back?
Well, the clinical literature focuses on a concept called ego strengthening. How do we build long-term emotional resilience? Our sources outline 3 very practical daily strategies for this.
Let's hear them.
The first is acceptance. But this doesn't mean starting with massive life-altering traumas. You have to build the muscle of acceptance through small daily practice.
Like accepting that it's raining when you wanted to go to the beach?
Exactly. Or accepting that someone just cut you off in traffic. When you get furious at the rain or the driver, your internal parent state is basically throwing a tantrum that reality isn't conforming to your rules.
Right.
By actively choosing to accept the reality of the moment without fighting it, you are exercising your adult state. You build the capacity to tolerate distress without deploying extreme defense mechanisms.
Okay, so what's the second strategy from the sources?
Adjusting expectations.
Oh, that's a big one.
We established that the superego sets impossible ideals. That means every unrealistic expectation you hold is essentially a trap you are setting for your own disappointment.
Because if you expect a massive project to go flawlessly, the first minor hiccup is going to trigger a meltdown.
Right. So by consciously lowering your expectations of yourself and others to a realistic human level, you drastically reduce your daily frustration. You are actively shrinking the gap between reality and the impossible ideal.
Makes total sense.
And the third strategy builds on this. Consciously raising frustration tolerance through positive framing.
How does positive framing actually change the mechanism in the brain, though?
Well, when you encounter a setback, the automatic superego response is to view it as a catastrophic failure, a reflection of your fundamental inadequacy.
Which kicks off that whole physiological stress response we talked about.
Exactly. Positive framing forces the ego to intervene and reframe the setback as a puzzle to be solved or a standard learning opportunity.
So it's not just toxic positivity.
No, this cognitive shift actually reduces the physiological stress response. It signals to the amygdala that you are not under threat, which enhances your ego's ability to cope logically.
This brings me to one of my absolute favorite analogies in the source material regarding quieting the inner critic.
Oh, the movie one.
Yes. The author references the classic 1956 sci-fi movie Forbidden Planet.
Such a great comparison.
In the film, a space crew is exploring a distant planet and they start being hunted by these terrifying, invisible, unstoppable monsters. They try to fight them with energy weapons, but nothing works. Eventually, they discover the horrifying truth. The planet's ancient technology is reading their subconscious minds.
The monsters aren't aliens at all.
They're physical manifestations of the crew's own unmanaged, aggressive aid impulses. The crew is literally being attacked by their own psychology.
It is a stunning metaphor for the inner critic and the demands of the superego.
It really is.
Because the monsters we spend our lives running from, the fear of failure, the dread of judgment, the crushing anxiety, they are almost always our own internalized expectations manifesting as real-world terrors.
And the sources map out 4 concrete steps to dismantle those monsters and flick that critical little guy off your shoulder.
Right.
Step 1, examine your belief system. You have to sit down and ask yourself, do the rigid beliefs you are holding yourself to actually reflect the adult you are today, or are they inherited rules from 30 years ago?
Which leads directly to step 2. Articulate your fears. You have to trace them back to their origin.
Where did this terror of making a mistake actually come from?
Exactly. Was it a demanding teacher? A hypercritical parent? Once you name the source, the fear loses some of its mystical power.
Step 3 is a tough one, though. Stop acting just to avoid letting down past authority figures.
It is incredibly common for adults to structure their entire careers and personal lives around a delayed, unconscious attempt to win the conditional love of a caregiver.
Even if that caregiver isn't around anymore.
Sometimes they may not even be alive. You have to recognize that you are playing a game with a ghost.
And step 4, update ancient dicta. You have to realize that the old rules of survival you learned as a child simply do not apply to the independent adult you are now.
The article frames it perfectly for you, the listener.
It really does. The psychological baggage you are carrying around was packed by authority figures from your youth, but you can't just set it down on the train and expect it to go away.
The train is your life, and it's moving forward. The baggage travels with you.
So you have to actively throw it off the moving train.
Yes. You have to learn the difference between a real present danger, like an incoming tornado, and a fraudulent fear, like an ancient arbitrary rule from your childhood that you are still obediently following.
It's so profound. But for many people, the internal critic is so entrenched that throwing the baggage off the train alone feels impossible.
And this is precisely where psychodynamic therapy proves invaluable. A core mechanism of this therapy isn't just the insights you gain, it is the therapeutic relationship itself.
How does the relationship actually change the architecture of the mind, though?
Well, the therapist provides a consistent environment of unconditional acceptance, what Carl Rogers called unconditional positive regard.
Which is huge for someone who grew up with conditional love.
It's a radical experience for them. They can express their fears, their failures, and their ugly influences, and the therapist does not punish them.
Wow.
Over time, through repeated exposure to this safety, the client begins to internalize the therapist's calm, accepting voice. They slowly replace their harsh, tyrannical superego with a compassionate adult inner voice.
It's literally rewiring the software of your mind to be kinder to yourself. It takes time, but by strengthening the ego, you strip the superego of its tyrannical power.
You move from a state of blind historical reaction to a state of conscious present intention.
So let's bring this all together. We've gone from the hidden, pressurized depths of Freud's unconscious id and superego through the perfectionistic traps they set for us, all the way to Bernie's social ego states. We've seen how our early childhood scripts dictate our adult arguments and our workplace anxieties. But the ultimate takeaway for you today is that you are not hopelessly bound to those scripts.
Not at all.
By strengthening the rational ego, by consciously choosing to practice acceptance, adjust your expectations, and be the adult in the room, we can replace self-hatred and rigid perfectionism with genuine self-compassion.
And I'd like to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your week.
Okay, let's hear it.
Pay attention to the subtle games you might be playing in your daily life. The next time you find yourself reacting intensely to a minor piece of criticism, maybe an email from a boss or an offhand comment from a partner, take one deep breath, pause, and ask yourself, who is actually responding right now?
Oh, that's good.
Is it the rational, capable adult you are today? Or is it a frightened child desperately trying to appease an impossible inner judge?
Throw that baggage off the train.